Have you ever tried to transport a glass of water, or in my case, iced tea, that's super full all the way up to the brim, and you're doing that weird walk trying to make sure you don't spill it, maybe the dog water bowl, or you're so concentrated on it that you can't focus on everything else it is that's going on. And sometimes have to stop and ask yourself, why am I filling this thing all the way to the top? So let's unpack that a little bit today and see what that means for us as individuals and leaders. Welcome back to another episode of Leading Beyond the Spreadsheet, the podcast where analytical leaders come to transform their technical expertise into embracing and excelling with the people part of work. I'm your host, Kris Liebau, owner of Action and Ease Leadership Coaching. So I mentioned this concept of the glass, and maybe that first question that comes to your mind is, yeah, why am I trying to do this with this whole thing full and doing that tiptoe dance through the kitchen? Or maybe it's how can I make this possible? Right. So in this engineering analytical mind, it's like, well, how can I do this? Like, can I freeze it? Can I put a lid on it? Like, what are all the other different ways that I can make this thing possible or easier? And so sometimes we can get into these really complex solutions in trying to go about solving that issue that we're facing. And for today's discussion, that glass represents your operational capacity. So in looking at this, if we're talking about 100% in the glass and 100% operational capacity, right, what light bulbs go off in our brains? We are in a world where there's this culture, there's this expectation that we put on ourselves. Sometimes we put on others that say that we need to give 100% or 110%. So we find ourselves running around all the time trying to do this thing. Like, how do I keep this full? And it gets really exhausting. And in this idea that we all have to live to our full potential. We have to maximize the day, right? Every inch in our calendar is beautifully mapped out and color coded, or maybe you wish it were, and that's something that you're striving for. When we look at that operational capacity in the glass, the thing that comes to mind for me is this concept of duty cycle. When people design products, design systems, there's this expected use case that comes along with it, right? So within those, typically something's not running at 100% of its operational capacity the entire time. It's not designed to do that, right? Maybe it's designed to run in the middle, and then it has, this surge capacity that takes it to 100%. And so as we think about these methods that we apply to the designs of these things, we can look at what this means for ourself. Right? I can't run at 100% all of the time. And that's not the equation or the setting that we want to have in order to live an impactful and fulfilling life, right? Because we're walking around the whole time, trying to figure out, how do I get more into the glass? Or if it spills, I got to go clean it up, and I got to fill it back up again. So we can spend a lot of energy, in trying to keep it full all the time. So I want to ask you, what does your duty cycle look like? Just reflecting back on the last week or month, or summer. Maybe some of you guys are like, it's fall. Maybe some of you guys are like sliding into fall going, oh, thank goodness, I can breathe because I'm not on the go all the time. So where have you been? And regardless of, where you're at, if you're feeling kind of tired, how much longer do you think you can keep it up? What's the life, of that device? Like, what's that a life expectancy? Like, what we look at this world of burnout. How much longer do you feel that you can maintain this level of operation that you're at, or the striving or that feeling right? That you need to get more and you're trying to figure out what's the magical way in order to, up that to reach whatever you think that 100% happens to be. So when we aren't at 100% or our team isn't at 100%, we're often focused on what it takes to close that gap. And right, so we just had the Olympics a month or so ago. Elite athletes have incredible stamina and strength. They also rest and take sleep. They don't work at their full limit for long periods of time, right? Even especially like in the swimming, right? Some people have multiple events in a day. They don't swim at 100% every day. They're strategic about what they need in order to be successful or to set themselves up in the future. So in reality, for us mere mortals that aren't Olympians, right, we really want to be operating more around this like 70% capacity so that we have the ability to have this surge capacity so that we can rise to the occasion when it is necessary, right? When we're going at 100%, sorry, my hand is not, as I'm gesturing with this, right? My hand's not always on the mark. We need to be able to rise to have some additional capacity in order to take things on. And when we feel like we need to take a break, we judge ourselves. Even in NASCAR, right? Go fast and go around and around and around. They still have to take pit stops. Right? They have to refuel. They've got to take care of the tires, whatever, clean the windshield. Even NASCAR drivers take pit stops in those important races. So when we take these breaks for ourselves, it gives us some capacity to be there for ourselves, to be there for others, to be present in what it is that's going on. If we're carrying that glass and it's somewhere between halfway full, right, we can casually have that conversation and talk with people, right? Because your eyes aren't glued trying to maximize every little bit that needs to be eked out or that you feel that needs to be eked out. What I'm really trying to say here is that less is more. Right? When we're not killing ourselves to get things done or wasting the extra energy of trying to eke out that last little bit, we're not going to get the return on investment in pushing ourselves continuously in that way. So I first shared this concept with a close friend of mine, and she really took it to heart. She went, "Oh, wow, this concept of duty cycle really resonates with me." And so she got really intentional around what does this 70% mean and how do I set myself up with this? So in doing that, she felt way more at peace and energized, being able to focus what it was in front of her. Right? She had greater satisfaction. And then her family experienced an untimely passing of a family friend. And she reached out to me and said, "Thank you so much for introducing me to this concept," because in that time, she had capacity to be able to be there for her family, to be there with her friends, to honor that grieving process, right? There are always things that are going to happen that are going to eat up, right, that surge capacity. And sometimes that happens a lot. However, there's a big difference when we're boogieing down, at 70% and our RPM is at a reasonable level. Yeah, sometimes we have to step on the gas and drive it up, speed things up. But when we're already redlining everything, we don't have that capacity. So can we do it? Yeah, it's a completely different feeling. Again, how long can we sustain this? I've talked about this concept with many of my clients, and one person in particular really connected with this and was trying to think about how this impacts and to really do some reflection. And so she graphed it, right? She started going in right at the end of each day. She's like, where was I at? And she started to look, and that gave her this sense of understanding of like, oh, right, why is it that I'm so tired, right? When we're looking at trying to close this gap to 100%, It was a way to visually and quantifiably bring about this idea to honor what it really was that she was bringing in both her personal and professional life and how she was engaging. It made her feel a bit better about, right, about why she was so tired and exhausted with everything. So we have, right, these high expectations for ourselves. And sometimes we need to play around with different ways, right, to see how is that really truly serving us. And the other thing too is you probably do a really great job of cutting other people slack when they really need it. I'm not saying it's always perfect, right? We have high expectations for other people, though. If you're sick, right? I can't tell you how many times I did this, like pre-pandemic, right? I'm super sick. I feel really bad about not going into work, right? I feel lazy. Oh, am I sick enough to stay home? You got this whole thing. So, right, you drag yourself out of bed, you get dressed, you go into the office, and people look at you and say, "Oh, you look terrible. Why don't you go home?" And it's in that moment that we're like, okay, thank you, right? We're looking for this external validation of things, right? In all those situations, right? I knew it. I knew I wasn't well enough to go to work. And so being aware of these societal and cultural pressures that we have around things, and right, what's that, even though it may not explicitly be communicated, right, what's that culture that's a part of your team around this concept of duty cycle and where people are expected to perform? So you might be saying, so how is it that I'm going to scale back? Like, I love this idea, I really buy into this concept, what do I actually do? Nothing that I'm going to share here is revolutionary, though. Find something that connects for you. You're not going to dial it back down, drop it 30% overnight. Maybe you can, maybe there's a big project. So what are some of the little things, or where are some of the places, right, that tend to eat up that capacity? Where are the places that you really should be delegating? And I mean this professionally and personally within there, right? When you say yes to stuff like, oh, yes, I'm so flattered that you've asked me to do this, right? You're saying no to something else. You're eating up that capacity. So, what's really important when you take on additional projects, roles, and responsibilities? Right, take a look at what's going on. What's something, so not just the incoming, but that personal inventory of the stuff that's going on. What is something that is no longer serving you or benefiting you? It's just that thing that you do, that you've always done. We've always done it this way. Where are those opportunities? What's something that's, right, no longer profitable? Another option is planning in some personal recharge at some point throughout the day. You may not have a schedule where it can always be at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? At the beginning of the week, you can take a moment to look at your calendar and place those things in at reasonable times. Or maybe that's something that you do each morning before you get out of bed, to have a little bit of padding and space for yourself. The other thing too, we talked about delegating. Sometimes it's hiring things out. What opportunities are there in the workplace in order to have another group to take that on? Personally, is it having somebody come and mow the lawn? It's fall. Do you need help with leaf pickup, grocery delivery? I met people that are really resistant to the idea of getting to have somebody come in and clean their house once or twice a month. What are the things that are cutting into this capacity that you need to be able to have for these surge capacity, for these extra special events? And again, it's so easy to have these conversations with other people and make these suggestions. So in that, right, reflect on, if you find yourself in one of those conversations, right, reflect on, maybe what your own internal resistance to those things are. What's some of that chatter? What are some of these cultural, social expectations that may be at play that impact our ability to connect with some of these ideas in order to create additional operating capacity? So I mentioned the cultural and social aspect of these things too. This is something that's worth talking about explicitly within your team if this is something that people are struggling with. Work to develop your own language or normalize the ability to be able to talk about those things. Because if everybody is going at 100% or putting at that 110%, that's going to impact their desire to collaborate, their creativity, right? Their mood, all of these things that are really important in getting the job done and actually being excited about doing the thing. The other aspect of this is that it's something that needs to be an ongoing part of the conversation. This is not a one and done type of a thing. Our lives are cyclical, right? We go through changes, right? The holidays come and then January drops off and then there's spring break or that product launch or summer vacations. So sometimes these things that impact where we're operating in that duty cycle are sneaky because they happen slowly. And so having that a part of that ongoing conversation, right? Checking in with people, sharing observations is an opportunity to help people develop some of this awareness and drop some of that stigma and concern about, right, what happens if I'm not in there and I'm not giving it 100% all the time. So, my final point here is that your self worth and potential are not tied to the level at which you operate. Self care and rest is not lazy or self indulgent or selfish, it's essential. You are just as amazing of a person at 60% as you are at 100%, and maybe even more, right? If we're working at that 60-70%, we have, oh yeah, I can help with that, I can take these things on, right? We have that ability to give and take. When you're at 100%, right, you're redlining it and you're marching through all the time. So who do you want to buddy up with at work? That person who's always at 100%, or that person who has some capacity in order to be able to breathe, in order to be able to connect? So having that additional bandwidth, right, makes us better humans because we have time for those relationships. We can create spaces where there's that connection and satisfaction, um, and community. Thank you for tuning into this episode. This is a great share episode. As you were listening to this, a lot of this may have resonated with you, or you could have also been going like, oh yeah, this person really needs to hear this too. So who in your organization or in your life can benefit from this fresh perspective around operational capacity and duty cycle? Take a moment to share with whomever it was that came to your mind as you were listening. Be sure to shoot it their way. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. And if you'd like to be the first to hear about the latest episodes and you'd like that information delivered to your inbox, you can sign up at actionandeasecoaching.com/beyond. See you next time.